Welcome to day two of Family Mediation Week, and we're here today with the webinar on emotional readiness, practical tips to manage turbulent emotions during separation and divorce. I'm Sarah Manning, a solicitor and accredited mediator at Hall Brown Family Law, and I'm on hand today to help with any of the questions at the end of today's webinar. I've got with me today Emma Heptonstall and Kerry Lawler, so I'm going to pass you over to them to get started. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Emma Heptonstall. I am a former lawyer, family mediator, and currently working as a trauma responsive therapeutic divorce coach.
And hello from a wet and windy Yorkshire. Actually, Emma, you're from Yorkshire as well, aren't you? I'm Kerry
I
Lawler.
am.
I'm from the law space, and I'm a psychotherapist, a coach, and a trainer. And I'm really, really pleased to be with you today to talk about emotional readiness. Over to you.
Thank you. So the first slide, please, Kerry. Thank you. So what is emotional readiness? So emotional readiness is the ability to just acknowledge the difficult feelings that you have without being controlled by them. And I know that sounds easier said than done. And throughout the course of this webinar, Kerry and I are going to give you some tips and some skills about how to get yourself in the best possible position. When I was mediating, one of the things that I noticed really readily was that people would come to the process because they had to, not because they were ready. And if you're not ready, it makes the process a lot harder. It makes you more fearful. It makes you not be as open to possibilities for solutions as you might otherwise be. So, stepping back and getting yourself emotionally ready so that you acknowledge how you do feel and yet not be controlled by them is really the way forward. It's not about ignoring how you feel, it's just about accepting that your emotions are valid and that there are things that you can do to hold how you feel while still moving forward. So, we're going to be talking about the emotions of anger, grief, and uncertainty, but ensuring that whilst you're acknowledging those within yourself, you still have the skills to move forward. And the benefit to you is that mediation is more likely to be successful. But even beyond the mediation room, and this is what I love about being emotionally ready for change in all its forms, is that the skill that you learn will take you forward in all aspects of your life, not just in the mediation room. If it is that mediation is not successful and you end up having to go down the court process, if that does happen, you will have the skills to be able to manage those emotions as they arise. And in reality, it is less likely, if you're emotionally ready, that you will end up in that situation. So there's every reason to stay with us this afternoon, get some learning, feel free to ask questions, and be ready to move forward. Next slide, please, Kerry. So, what happens when our emotions go unprocessed? Well, when we're feeling bad thoughts, they leak out of us from everywhere, even though we might think that we're doing a stellar job of hiding how we think and feel from other people. And a really pertinent example of this is The Traitors. Now, whether you're a Traitors fan or not, if you have watched that show, you will be watching the reactions of the people, the contestants, the players that have played that game. They, in the moment, are unaware of their leakiness, their microfacial expressions, their body language. All of this is the same in the mediation room. So if you're fearful, if you're frightened, if you're angry, even if you're smiling and pretending to grin and bear it, the interpersonal neurobiology that goes on between you and the other people in the environment is sending messages. And what happens is, even though you might be smiling and pretending that you feel confident and calm, internally, if you're anxious, if you're worried and nervous, it is more likely that you are like to be triggered by something your partner says. So that triggering might come from something that's intentional or unintentional. But if you're not feeling calm and you're not feeling well resourced inside, the conflict is likely to escalate. you're likely to say something that you may not mean, or that even if you do, damages the relationship in the mediation room, causes further conflict and delay. It might also mean, conversely, that you make decisions that you don't really want to make because you just want those feelings to go away. You want to get out of the space as soon as you can. So you say yes when actually you mean no. It also means that you have difficulty listening not only to your partner and what they're saying, but also to the mediator and the suggestions and the directions that they're trying to support you to move in. It also means that when you're at home or out of the environment, if that anger and that frustration is bubbling away underneath, you're more likely to pass that on to your children, even though you don't mean to. So even though you might be saying all the right things to your children about their other parent, for example, their internal neurobiology knows that you don't really mean it. And they also know that at an unconscious level. And this begins to play out. So your children then become anxious, and we'll talk more about that later on in this afternoon's presentation. Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you, Emma. I think we should also kind of acknowledge, shouldn't we, that people that are joining us today will be at various points, won't they? Either
Absolutely.
that they will be at the beginning of this process and thinking about separation or divorce with the kind of trajectory ahead of them. They might be in the midst of it. So there might be people that are listening that are absolutely up to their neck in the kind of emotional distress and challenge that this process can bring. Or we might find you in the aftermath. You might be a year, a month, you might be weeks after the settlement is reached, and there are various points in that process, obviously. And so, in and amongst that, we're kind of hoping to be able to catch you all, but we're also recognizing that everybody experiences this in quite a different way. So, for some individuals, when we talk about emotional readiness, we're aware that for some of you, this is catastrophic. For some of you, this is a relief. So, we're going to try and catch all, aren't we, Emma? But I think it's really, really important that we acknowledge where you're at when we start this process. And I feel like it would be inauthentic of me not to say that I'm 5 years through this process now, and I wasn't ready. And actually, I kind of fought my way through it in a way that wasn't ready at any point. And I think if my children were listening to this, they would also say, "Oh my God, it was a roller coaster for us all, and it was a roller coaster definitely for my parents." So I kind of hopefully I can share some of my own kind of insight into that in just a really authentic, kind of non-judgmental way. I would say that I'm being such a therapist. But look, back to the slides. Why does emotional readiness matter? It matters for you. Um, Honestly, if you are in a solid, calm, and safe kind of place, and you are able to contain your own distress, then you're going to be much better able to make difficult decisions, to negotiate, to come to the table with a kind of sense of wanting to bring resolve in the least kind of stressful way. You're likely to have much less stress, much less distress in your psychological system and in your emotional life. And we know that there will be faster recovery for you at the other side. So, thinking that you can go through this without being kind of touched by the kind of emotional distress, the kind of impact as it hits you, as it hits your partner, as it hits your children, it's really very important that we think about getting ready. Of course, if you're going into the mediation process, this means that you're much better equipped for productive conversations, going into the room ready for kind of conflict, and that being the kind of moment that you're going to kind of protest and demonstrate your distress doesn't really set you up in a good way to be able to get through the mediation and have the difficult conversations that you need to have. So it allows you to be able to listen and to bring some creative solutions, some shared problem solving solutions. And absolutely, for our children, the lower the conflict, the less distress that they're bled into, as Emma has said, from both parents, the better. And we know that from the research data. And so, if we can keep stability, if we can be healthy role models in terms of how we regulate ourselves and how we cope with difficult conversations, then we're going to do a much, much better job for our children. It really is a game changer. And I didn't always get it right. I can say that. So we've suggested some of the core emotions you may feel, and I think that you could probably sit there and say, well, and some, but certainly the ones that I witnessed as a working psychotherapist and ones that I know that I felt myself were feelings of anger, feelings of injustice, feelings of betrayal, feelings of powerlessness, feelings of being completely out of control in terms of what is going to happen and what your future is going to look like. With that also can come this sense of grief. I sometimes describe it as the gift that keeps on giving, because there's a kind of loss, isn't there? There's a loss of a family life, there's a loss of an identity, there's a loss of security, there's a loss of your shared future, there's a loss of many, many things, like tons and tons and tons of threads. And I think that that grief can stay for a really, really long time if not processed well. Emma, I'm sure that you see an awful lot of people behaving out of a sense of grief and out of a sense of anger. And then, of course, uncertainty. The process itself, when you've never interfaced with it, which was my experience, was terrifying, frankly. And I didn't know what was coming next. I didn't know what to expect. And also the kind of idea of being independent and having to manage my own affairs, also challenging when you've been in a really long-term relationship. So uncertainty, we don't do well with it. It breeds anxiety and it also breeds control. And those are things that definitely show up really profoundly when people are experiencing this kind of season shift. Emma, over to you.
Thank you. So the first step is to normalize the emotions that Kerry's talked about, because feeling all of that just makes you a normal human being, and accepting that that is the way you feel. So there's no shoulds about, well, you should feel this, particularly for those of you that have been in the process for a while. Perhaps you're only just coming to mediation, but you've been separated for a long time. Or perhaps you're going back into the mediation process because things aren't working out with the arrangements for your children and you're judging yourself. Well, the first thing that you can do is to just let go of that. It really is a roller coaster of emotions. And there'll be days where you feel great and that you can recognize how you've moved forward. And there'll be days where you just feel stuck and you think, I cannot believe after this many weeks, months, or even years that I still feel the way that I do. But that's part of the grief process. And accepting that you are imperfect as a human being and yet perfect at the same time, because you are an imperfect human being, gives yourself the grace that you can just accept what is. Naming those emotions, however hideous it may feel, is the start. Just accepting that if you're really upset, annoyed, and angry with somebody else, then name it, say it out loud, not to your children. Find your person or your space to say those things and just accept that that's how you feel. You don't have to be perfect. It's not going to be easy and it takes practice. You know, when I work with people, and I'm sure this is the same for Kerry, it's not oh, it makes logical sense. I can do that. I'm going to be perfect from tomorrow. You will fall off the wagon many times. It will come and bite you on the bottom when you were thinking that you were further along than you are. All of these things are completely normal. And as time goes on, you will notice the frequency of the triggers, of the intense emotions changing. When they occur, they won't be as intense as they were to start with. When they occur, it won't occur as frequently as they did. There will be circumstances where you feel really heightened and other circumstances where you can just let things go. And it doesn't mean because you accept the way you feel that you agree with what the other person is saying. Part of the mediation process is understanding that compromise is part of the process. And there are things that you may decide that for the welfare of yourself and your emotional mental health, and those of your children, that you need to come to agreement. But it doesn't mean that every fibre of your being has to agree. It just means that you're moving to a further stage in the process. You can still have your own value base. And that might be letting go of the fact that the way that your child's other parent parents isn't the way that you parent. That doesn't make them wrong and it doesn't make them right, but you may agree that for everybody's emotional well-being, you can let it go, and that is the acceptance. And even though you might feel anger about that, as you move through and the children move between your house and their house, you will feel more acceptance. And as you begin to see that actually your children can manage having one rule in your house and other rules in the other parent's house, all is well. Next slide, please, Kerry. So, how do we know how we're truly feeling? Because we get good at pretending, particularly in front of our children, and maybe our parents do, people who love us and care about us and are worried about us, and maybe it's our boss at work. We like to pretend that everything is okay because society kind of expects us to behave that way. How do we do an emotional check-in without judgment? It's just asking yourself this simple question, what is it I'm feeling? And naming it. And that might be through talking to yourself out loud, talking to somebody else, and it could be journaling. But just, am I angry? Am I scared? Am I frustrated? Am I really worried? Am I feeling like I'm just a ball of anxiety and I don't know what to do? When you name it, already the intensity of that is going to lessen. And do you know what has triggered it? Now, there'll be certain circumstances that you experience where you know exactly what's triggered it. Your partner said something in a particular way or looked at you in a particular way, and it's just sent you into the stratosphere of anger or shame or rage. And the more you can just notice what you notice about those triggers, you can be mindful about how you respond to them when they happen. Because part of this letting go process is recognizing that you have power over you, but you don't have power over somebody else, even if they're trying to exert power over you. So you can't change how they respond and react and what they do and what they say, but you can change with practice the way that you respond to that. And understanding that and naming the emotion that that other person elicits in you is a really good starting point. It's also fair to say that you don't have to fix everything because some of it won't be fixable. But one thing is clear is that if you respond differently to a trigger, if the trigger is your child's father or mother, your other parent, that if you respond differently, they have to then respond differently to you because you're changing the dynamic. Will it happen overnight? No, but slowly over time, if you change the way that you are, they will automatically have to change the way that they are. Will it be easy? No, but will it be worth it? Absolutely. So, what do you need right now? Is it a bit of time? Is it a bit of space? Is it some help with a script? And Kerry will talk more later about how you can reach out and find that support. Thanks, Kerry.
Now then, step 2, the pause routine. Oh, I wish that I had learnt this lesson a few years ago. Viktor Frankl says that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our opportunity to choose our response. Are we reactive or are we responsive? And how we turn up in that space between stimulus and response is so critically important. This is like a superpower if we can teach you to do this. Because we absolutely recognize that you're going to be triggered. You're going to be triggered by all manner of things, and you could be triggered for years to come. And if you can stop and pause before you react, you will respond from an entirely different place. So I think that this is important in the mediation process, in the actual process of it, but it's also important in any dialogue via messages services, my family wizard, or anything. Stop and pause before you respond. Now, like if we could, in a film, you can point the remote control and you can just pause it for a hot minute and go, okay, what just happened? Notice the reaction in your body. Notice the thoughts and feelings that kind of flood up your nervous system when you kind of either panic or you're triggered and you're angry. If you could just pause it for a second so that you could just regroup enough, then you would respond differently. Now, that's tricky. That's tricky in the moment. It's tricky when you're in a room. But I want to suggest to you that you drop into your breath. Now, a breath is an incredibly powerful resource for us. Who knew that we'd be designed with our breath in our body that has the power to calm our parasympathetic nervous system? So I want you to bring your attention inwards to your breath. I want you to slow your breathing down and count for 5, 10 if you can. I want you to inhale through your nose and exhale quietly or loudly through your mouth, but not in a way that makes a huff sound, because otherwise it just sounds like you're blustering. Bringing your attention inward, as I said, focusing on the rhythm of your breath, dropping down into your chest, even sometimes helpfully putting your hand on your tummy or your hand on your chest, counting your breaths in for 5 to 10, and then answering. Now, the fabulous Brené Brown, who I love, and I'm sure you guys will get in touch with her. She actually has a speech habit that she's embedded into her life, which is where she pauses between answering questions or thinking. She calls it her thinking time. She actually has to brief people when they record her on television or they record her on podcasts to not cut out the pauses, because she's doing it deliberately. And she's doing it because it gives her a moment to drop inward, to count her breath, and to think about her answer. So I want you to do that. When you think about breath, then I want you to think about grounding. I want you to bring your internal eye, your internal attention to your feet on the floor. Sometimes it helps to put both feet on the floor. Sometimes to kind of check the position in the chair, underneath your bottom or up your back. Sometimes if you're going into a session and it's like online, I would always have something like a hot water bottle or even like a weighted blanket across my knee so that I know that my position is strongly grounded. So think about that. Think about, I'm going to just ground myself. Notice the things around you. You can literally run your eyes around the room in that kind of count to 5 breath and think books, clock, lamp, tree, garden furniture blown over. You can name 5 things that help just ground you into the present moment, and then you choose your response. And I want you to think about this in lots of kind of high conflict teaching. We learn to think about this as, rather than a kind of a two-throw fight, think of it as a dance. Could you kind of sidestep? Could you actually reply in a way that is going to move the conversation forward? So you're able to choose your response from a place of groundedness, from a place of presence, from a place of pause. It is incredibly powerful. Like I said, I wish I'd done this a few more times, because without question, I have exploded and I have reacted, and the mess that I then have to clear up emotionally or practically has been difficult, no question. But the pause routine is a little superpower. Do you do that, Emma? Do you ever do pause routine?
Absolutely. Grounding is just non-negotiable, really. Um, Before seeing clients, I have to ground myself because, life is going on around us all the time. It could be you're just waiting for an Amazon parcel, it hasn't arrived, you're getting frustrated, you're getting agitated. Just bringing yourself to the present, to the here and now is so important.
Really is. We're terrible, aren't we? Kind of allowing our nervous system to kind of run the show. And when we're in high stress, when we're in acute distress, our nervous system is going to be really hyper aroused, and it doesn't take much to tip us over. So, really proactively working on bringing our nervous system into soothe, being in the present moment is critical. We'll talk about mindfulness in a second. But one of the ways that I do that is I've got a tiny trampoline, one of the little kind of got not the kids trampoline, like an exercise trampoline. And I will quite often find myself, if I'm feeling really kind of het up, I literally bounce on my trampoline for 1 minute. And that massively helps bring, again, it deepens my breath because I inhale really deeply, which throws my sympathetic system into soothe. And it just lowers my shoulders, and then I can step off it and I can answer in a different way. So find ways of being able to embed this into your life. Sometimes it's people having a shower. If you're at home, just go in the shower, have some hot or cold water, come back out, answer the email. Try to create the pause routine. Oh, I should have said, you probably say this too, Emma, maybe along the way, but if you're going to write the email, but then just pause. Pause, and if you can, wait overnight, because sometimes when you go back to it, you can really reframe it in a different way. Perhaps I've stolen something from you there, Emma. Let me just move on to the mindfulness tool. Mindfulness traditionally is this idea of doing meditation practice. And for many of you, meditation practice will be helpful. And certainly exercises like a body scan or the naming things, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 idea is helpful. No question. Body scan is helpful when you have high levels of distress and trauma and you feel quite disassociated. So you feel a bit kind of separate to your body. Actually bringing your mindful attention, so the focus of your attention into your body and then moving it around. So you're focusing on your feet, your left foot, your left shin, your left knee, your left hip, up the side of your body, down your left arm, down to your hand, down to your fingers. That exercise of body scanning, of which, by the way, there's millions of them on Headspace, Insight Timer. To be honest, even on YouTube, you can get a 2, 3, 5, 10 hour long body scan. Really, really helpful for bringing you back into your body. And as is the idea of counting the things that name the 5 things that you see, the 4 things that you hear, it doesn't really matter which order you do it in. It's about bringing you into the present moment. But let me just caveat that. As a therapist, I have to say, if you have really, really high anxiety, I think actually sometimes sitting and trying to meditate actually just creates 10, 15 minutes of even higher anxiety because you start running all the things. If you have got ruminative, racing thoughts, actually mindfulness practice can be tricky, really, really tricky, and sometimes it can make you feel worse. So I always recommend that actually you do mindful movement. So you think about going for a walk. If exercise is your thing, be that swimming, be that walking, be that running, going to the gym, mindful movement is a really helpful way of you being able to get that kind of respite of the kind of crazy to calm your nervous system. If you've never done mindful walking, that's effectively where it's an exercise that we practice, but you walk across your lawn barefoot and really, really slowly noticing the sensation of the steps. It's a great exercise to do, probably not in January. And also, if you're like me with 2 dogs, check the lawn. You go walking barefoot. But it is a useful exercise. So mindfulness, like I said, really helpful. But possibly if you know that you've got very, very high anxiety and you're very, very heightened, maybe try some movement mindfulness instead. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up to kind of feel worse. Emma, over to you.
Thank you. So, step 3, building daily resilience. And this doesn't have to take all day. These can be little micro habits that build over time. It takes us time to accept a new habit into our lives, but these foundational points will make a huge difference through the divorce, separation, mediation process. Being consistent is what matters. And being consistent with your sleep, particularly, is so important. And if you're finding it challenging to sleep because you are overstimulated, because you are highly anxious, it's something that you really will benefit from focusing your attention to. Things like the mindfulness app, the calm app, sleep stories. I'm listening to a sleep story now, and I've tried, I think, 4 times to listen to it. I want to know what the end is, but I'm always asleep before the end, so I don't know how it ends. So I think I'm actually going to have to listen to that while I'm awake, just so I know what happens. It is amazing just how much just taking your brain to something else. So if you, like me, might get into bed and start doing to-do lists of tomorrow, I need to do this, I need to send this email, switching that off and listening to a story will make such a difference, allowing your nervous system to relax, feeling your pillows under your head and the weight of your body on the mattress, and giving yourself an opportunity, not having the mobile phone in the bedroom, not having a TV on in the bedroom, giving yourself the opportunity to reclaim your sleep, try a different routine. If you are sleep deprived, your cortisol will be higher, you will be more anxious, and it becomes a vicious circle, going round and round, ruminating up in the middle of the night, then not being able to get back to sleep, then maybe falling asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning and not being able to get up when the alarm goes off. It is such a drainer that also drains our physical health. Limiting alcohol, it may be tempting to have that extra glass of wine before bed to help you sleep. Actually creates a negative pattern and a reliance that actually will perpetuate your sleep difficulties. Same with taking sleep remedies. If you use them sparingly. Give yourself a boundary about how long you'll use them before you go back to natural methods, such as a better sleep hygiene routine, going to bed earlier without your tech, for example. Kerry's already talked about the short daily mindfulness practices, the journaling. So important. Simple things like nutrition, watching what you're eating. Are you eating a healthy, balanced diet? Or are you, like me, and I'm so guilty of this, when I'm super busy or stressed, living off black coffee and biscuits because they're quick, they're easy, they provide everything that you need in that moment. But actually, if you rely on that for too long, again creates a negative habit. You need to nourish your body as well as your mind. And this will take time. And will you always be perfect? And will you have days where you think, oh my goodness, I've just, not slept and I'm reaching for the biscuits and I just need some coffee to power through. There are times when that is okay, but it's not a consistent way of moving forward. So you need to set your whole body and your environment up for calm, for success. Okay, next slide, please, Kerry. So it isn't all about candles and bubble bath. And if that is your thing, that's absolutely fine. I personally love a hot bath, but it might not be your thing. You might love to be out on a freezing cold, blowy day, having the cobwebs swept away, as it is in Yorkshire today. You might love being out with the dog in the rain. If that's your thing, do it. If you love being creative with music and art and cooking, anything that takes your attention away from your anxious state is going to be beneficial, because your amygdala is looking for trouble constantly. It's scanning the environment for anything and everything that can go wrong. Then it starts to see things in emails and text messages that may not actually be there. So, Kerry, you may have had this experience, but quite often a client will share with me an email or a text message, and they'll be incensed and outraged about the contents of this message or email. And I'll read it, and through my lens, I'm like, I don't see the problem that you see, because my nervous system isn't holding this email or this text message in the way that yours is. And that might be from your partner, it might be from their lawyer. But if you are calm, if your amygdala is calm and it's not looking at the threat constantly, it can be more resourceful and go, this is fine. It's just an email. I can park it. I can look at it later. And I'm going to go back to doing my cooking, doing my yoga, whatever it is. Spending time with trusted friends is so important. Like, you are not just a divorcing person or a separating person. You're somebody's child, you're somebody's sister, you're somebody's niece or nephew, you're somebody's best friend. And you need to keep being those versions of yourself, because if you are going to be in this process for possibly 2 or 3 years, maybe even more, you cannot become obsessed with where you're at now, because it will drain the life out of you. And importantly, the life of the people around you. Nobody likes a baby bore, and people like divorce bores and separation bores even less. So choose your space to talk about it, and then have a boundary with yourself that says, I will talk to my coach or therapist, my lawyer about what's going on. But when I see my mother, sister, girlfriends, um, I will not be talking about the divorce. If they ask me, they'll get a 2 minute headliner. If I'm going to the football match with my mates or to the pub, they might get a 1 minute, 2 minute, 30 seconds, whatever it is, update. And then the conversation changes. So you're giving your nervous system a chance to relax. And if you love the meditation, if you love prayer, if you like going out into nature, do whatever works for you, but don't take the separation and divorce with you. Imagine walking out the door and saying, goodbye, I'll see you later. You'll still be there when I get back, but you don't need to come with me. Thanks, Kerry.
Emma, I'm wishing that I had you to say that to me when I was going through mine. Um, what brilliant advice that is. So, so helpful. And I think that focus, as you said, on taking care of yourself in it, and actually also, I would say, finding myself in it, because I think you suddenly find that you actually are a person that has interests that are outside of the family. And certainly when you find yourself in a situation where the children are at dad's space and you're there on your own, you've got to find ways of nurturing your life and even bringing your life back um, in a way that I think it can be so beneficial. Okay, you've touched on the support network, and I think that that's really important, as is, as I've even suggested, being able to speak to somebody like you. But it is important, I think, as a social species, that we do share some of the difficulty or distress. Now, my advice on that would be to keep your circle small, so that you're not telling literally the woman at the checkout, the woman at the dentist, the hairdresser, every single one of your friends and every family member every single time you see. And you know what? There is a temptation to do that, and I kind of understand that. But pick a group of close friends and keep your counsel with them. I sometimes say, what's that famous saying? Don't throw your pearls to pigs. Be careful who you share with. Be careful that this information doesn't become currency in your communities, especially if you have shared communities with your ex-partner and you've got shared friendships. Be careful and pick them carefully and choose the right ones that are empathic. Sometimes we have friends and family members who just don't get it, and actually they can kind of make things feel worse because they just kind of dismiss or they kind of go, well, I haven't got over it yet. Um, they can actually be really, really difficult. But look, also, there's lots and lots of support groups online. Emma, you have an absolutely fantastic community online. There are divorce groups available. And I would certainly send you in those directions. And Emma, I think your website's up at the end. And I would say this, as I am a therapist, but I think way better for you to invest energy into speaking to a therapist. If you have trauma, if you have an awful lot of kind of betrayal, trust, if you have issues around your identity and a lot of distress and pain, then definitely seek out a BACP approved therapist. Make sure you get somebody that's properly a membership of a professional body and or accredited. That will really help you do the work. Very, very, very important. And also, perhaps cheaper to speak to your therapist than it would be to talk to your solicitor. And certainly, that's something that often people will say that they can spend hours talking to their therapist, and that means that they can use less time to be able to communicate with their individuals that they're charging for. And coach, there's a big body of growing divorce coaches. And Emma, you are leading the way and have done for the last 10 years. So definitely thinking about coach to help you move towards the future, to help you manage difficult conversations, to help you plan and strategize. I think coaches are amazing. And I wish 5, 6 years ago when I started this process, I knew that even such a thing existed, but they do now. And if you are interested in finding out more, do definitely reach out to Emma. And of course, mediators, we're here for Family Mediation Week. They do an incredible role at bringing collaborative help to the process of separation and divorce, and I think can take an awful lot of the distress and stress and challenge away from it. It's most certainly the way to go forward.
I totally agree with you, Kerry. And I talk to clients about having a divorce support team. So it's not just your lawyer, it's not just the mediator, it's not just the therapist, it's all the different people. And hybrid mediation, particularly, which I know Sarah's doing a session on this week, will support those people, particularly those that may be experiencing domestic abuse. There is support out there for you.
Sarah, your picture popped up. Did you want to jump in and add something there?
I was just getting ready for the question and answer.
Sorry, I put the spot on you.
I know, but I just think when you were saying about like emotionally ready, I've had that in mediation case before where I saw husband had left the wife and she really wasn't expecting it at all. And during the MIAM, she was just so upset, and I deemed mediation as unsuitable because she couldn't get through the MIAM with her emotions, let alone go to a joint session. And then I didn't see him for a year. They came back, and the lady that I spoke to was a completely different person, you know, a year later. But luckily in that case, the husband allowed the time without just issuing proceedings, you know, to then be able to deal with it later on. But that was a good example about being emotionally ready, because otherwise then you get stuck in the court process. And it wasn't as much as domestic abuse or anything. It was just the shock of the separation where he'd had probably 6 months, a year to come to terms with it when he decided to leave her.
Yeah, yeah. Great point. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide here, which is just, again, to just underscore the idea of just being so careful with your children. It's really, really important, even when we have adult children, that we don't lean on them to be our support network. And I get that this is tricky, and I get that they see a lot because they live in the house. And Emma, as you said, they pick up so much kind of unconscious signals from you as to whether you are not all right. Certainly, my daughters did for me. But children, younger children especially, they're just, the brain is just not able to process adult emotions. And actually for younger children, sometimes they will internalize that it's their fault, therefore, and it becomes their burden that they've done something wrong, and they've kind of caused it. And we see that a lot in child therapy, children taking responsibility for their parents' separation or divorce. So just be super, super, super careful. I'm sure you guys have got stories about this. Let's also remember that they have a loyalty to both sides, and they also often will feel as if they need to take responsibility for but either both or one of their parents' well-being. And asking a child to take sides in this situation is really, really, really difficult and unfair. Hearing details about the relationship, hearing details about trauma events or conversations or coming back from your meetings or sharing emails with them, hearing those details damages their relationship with the other parent. We actually just an hour ago I was doing a session on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and we know that children that hear and see and witness emotional distress of their parents, it actually is classified as an ACE, and those things go on to predict kind of future mental health and behaviour. So it's super important. And as we know, ongoing parental conflict. We know it's better for children to be living in separate households in calm and safe environments than for them to witness ongoing parental conflict or domestic abuse. So it's really very important that that we seek to protect our children in this process, and recognizing that this isn't something that's a quick fix. We're talking years and years of commitment to this, and even into adulthood, I think it's really very important that we are very, very careful stewards of our children's well-being. Emma, Sarah, I'm sure you've got experience of this and things to say. I wonder if there's anything you want to add. In fact, I think you do have another slide. So, Emma, over to you.
So protecting the emotional regulation of children, as Kerry said, is so important. I often say to clients that you are the captain of the ship. How
Mm.
you steer the ship will determine how safe the ship is. So if you're all over the place, the ship will be bobbing here, there, and everywhere. Everyone will feel dysregulated, emotional, maybe a bit nauseous. And so, to be a good captain, you have to chart a course that is safe and secure for your children. And if you're okay, your children will be okay. They'll feel safer and less anxious. You can then listen to them without burdening them with your emotions. You'll be truly emotionally available. Because the truth is, even if you give your children time, if you are not emotionally available, you're still not present. And that goes back to the importance of being grounded and regulated, because then you can truly hear. And you also need to remember this one thing, and I learned this probably, I don't know, 20 years ago, and it's stuck with me, is that you are the video that your children will replay. So whatever you do, your children are learning, internalizing, and they're going to copy whatever it is you do. If you want them to have healthy relationships in their adulthood, you have to model that yourself by leaving that relationship if it's no longer serving you and is unhealthy and toxic. And it's not about toxic positivity, it's about being honest and real, as we've said, but leaving and leaving well, leaving for your own mental well-being. Because the message you give your children then is it's okay to change things if they're not working. If they're unsafe, it's okay to leave. If you need support with that, then reach out. It will mean that when you go to mediation, if you are calm and you are rational, your children will get a better outcome. You'll make better decisions for them as well as for yourself. You're likely to get a financial settlement if you're talking about money, and you'll be able to move forward without looking back. And your children will thank you for it. Maybe not now, maybe not for another 5 years, and maybe not until they're parents themselves, but they will thank you for the way that you manage yourself in their parents' divorce. Thanks, Kerry. So, how do you start with this? It's about shifting your focus from what isn't working, what hasn't worked, the injustice, the unfairness, which are, as we've said, all valid, normal emotions. But when you get stuck in them, you can't actually move forward in the process. This is when we get people going to mediation saying, mediation doesn't work. It's not that mediation doesn't work, it's that you are not ready to do the thing that is required of you to enable the process to unfold, because it will unfold if you, and a caveat, the other person needs to be engaged too. This isn't just about you, and this isn't about making it all your responsibility. But if you don't shift, the other person certainly won't. If you do shift, there is a chance the other person will begin to meet you, and not always, and not every time. So that is a caveat. But how can you move from thinking that it's all going wrong to it could be just about to go right? And it's about thinking about the opportunity. There's an opportunity when something ends that something else begins, a new version of you. It might be that you have to say goodbye to the current family home that you absolutely love and adore. And there is an opportunity, not but, and there is an opportunity to create a new environment, a new way of being, a new version of yourself, a new way of parenting in a different environment. What do I want my future to look like? It's not about rehashing the past. And then you can also begin to think about how you get there in a more positive way, rather than looking at the other person that if you feel is responsible for all of this, and asking the question, What can we do so that we both have a secure financial future? What needs to happen? Can we discuss? Can we look at the numbers? Can we think about what our children need? Start by looking at what you agree with on first. Start with that grounding. What do we agree? We probably agree that we want our children to be okay. We probably agree that we don't want to have a situation where neither of us have any money left because we've used our money fighting for so long. So that's two things, even though they may feel tiny in amongst all the other things you've got to agree on. It's a start point because then you're building rapport. And in Elaine's session this morning with Kerry, you talked about rapport building, how important that is. How can you build rapport with somebody that you don't really have rapport with right now? Often it's getting a photograph of your children and saying one thing about your children that you both love. Chances are it's very similar. And that starts beginning to move things forward because at some point you did have agreement in your life and then you can respond. And again, will it be easy? No, but you begin to shift the focus about all the things that have gone wrong to all the things that could go right. Thanks, Kerry.
I love that. So helpful. And I think one of the ways in which you could start by doing that is by writing it down. So, as you've just described, getting the pictures, for example, these are ways that you can really prep yourself to write down. I wrote reams and reams and reams and reams, essays, thousands and thousands of words and notes almost every day to help kind of prioritize my focus and to think and feel through my writing work. And then asking yourself the question, when the blame arises, when you feel as if your focus is kind of again shifting towards kind of projecting outwards, bring it back and ask yourself, what do you need? What does my children need? What is the outcome that I want to get to? And then think about replacing your negative thoughts. I talk about this in CBT a lot. We're trying to equilibrate negative thoughts. Sometimes thoughts are not even facts. Sometimes we've made up whole stories and narratives. Sometimes we take a position of as I'm a victim in this. See if you can replace it, flip it on its head and turn it around. So instead of I'm a victim, this is the worst thing that's ever happened, you go to I'm rebuilding. I'm rebuilding. One of mine used to be there are other beautiful places to live. I used to say it over and over again like a mantra, to kind of equilibrate the grief of leaving the place that I lived. There are other beautiful places. Sometimes still say it to myself now. And then celebrate all the small wins, attending mediation, having a calm conversation, having a nice text exchange, surviving a parents' evening or an event, a shared event that you have to do. Think about just the small gains to build on. This is a journey that you are going to come through. It is survivable. Let me move on because I'm aware of the time. Again, around this language of solution focus in mediation, it's so good. Oh, sorry, I've stolen your slide, Emma.
It's fine, Kerry. I think we've
Yeah.
probably covered solution focused language because it goes with the mindset shift, doesn't it? So questions about what, how, what do we agree on? That is really solution focused language. So I think we could probably move on to the next slide,
Yeah.
actually, Kerry.
Yes. And just when to seek professional support. And I want to create some time for us to answer some questions. But look, when to get professional support. If you are having thoughts about harming yourself or others, please go see your GP or reach out to a private therapist. If your emotions are so overwhelming and so intense that actually it's impacting your ability to function, your ability to kind of go to work, your ability to sleep, kind of night and night and night after night. If you are using alcohol or substances to soothe, if you find yourself repeatedly going and needing soothing and you notice patterns forming, again, try and seek out some help as early as possible. And it goes without saying, if you're struggling to be present for your children, and maybe even noticing that sometimes this process triggers past trauma, stuff from your childhood that you might not have actually resolved. So it can be a very helpful moment to kind of seek external and professional support. And there are lots of resources available to you. The Family Mediation Council has a great website. We know, obviously, organisations like Relate offer low-cost counselling and support services. Cruise Bereavement Care have got groups. Again, although you might think that that's about death, actually, the grief groups are helpful for them. Mind, Samaritans, there are lots and lots of information lines, telephone lines, text lines available to you. And of course, the apps that we've already mentioned, Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer, and YouTube are actually all very, very helpful. Can you think of any other resources, Emma, that you think are helpful too?
I think you've got a fairly comprehensive list there, Kerry, to be honest.
Books for
Um,
me. I love listening to Brené Brown. I love listening to Esther Perel. She has some fantastic podcasts.
yeah, so podcasts are a great resource.
Yeah. In fact, Emma, you've got a podcast as well, haven't you?
The 6 Minute Divorce podcast, yes. There's 100 episodes plus on there. You can go and
Yeah.
download that, and they're literally 6 to 10 minutes, so super simple, quick. And so, keys tools summary. What can you do right now? What can you do daily? And what can you do ongoing? So if you take nothing away from this, maybe make a few notes about these now, daily, and ongoing. What can you do for yourself? Because if you choose to, you can begin to make a difference. And remember that this too shall pass.
Mm.
Some days will be hideous, like today's weather, and other days will be full of sunshine and fluffy clouds, and you will move forward. Just be kind to yourself.
Yeah, thank you for that, Emma. That's such a good point to end on. And so, again, we just urge you, choose something, write down something that you've heard from one of us today, one thing, and see if you can apply it to your life. Reach out for support if you haven't already got it, and certainly explore the possibility of mediation through the Family Mediation Council. You absolutely don't have to navigate this journey alone. Sarah, I'm going to hand back to you. I'm wondering if there's questions. I can see a few popping up as we went along.
Thank you, Emma and Kerry. That's really great and gives some good tools. Yeah, one of the questions is how do you bring up emotional readiness when working with clients who aren't emotionally ready? Me and you, Kerry, have had a case on where we've had this, haven't we? Where we've worked together, where I've picked up that one party's not emotionally ready to start with mediation. I signposted Kerry to do some work with actually both husband and wife, didn't I, Kerry?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Because both of them were in completely different places. So I think that can be a useful opportunity to bring in either a family consultant, a family therapist, or a psychotherapist to actually help people have the space to be able to have these conversations. Because sometimes people really find it difficult to talk to each other. I mean, it might sound bizarre, but people that live and share space actually stop talking. So having an independent person there therapeutically to support and contain that space is really helpful sometimes.
Yeah, and also signpost to you, Emma, in that sense, if I have somebody in mediation where I think are not emotionally ready to have that support to get up to speed with the other, but it goes back to the example I said earlier. It's on the basis that the other person gives them time and not attending their MIAM and then getting the court fee, the MIAM form, and then just issuing proceedings straight away. So it's sort of trying to get them both on an understanding that process. And that's the reason in one matter that I had where I referred them to Kerry, who could speak to both of them separately. But there's lots of support to do that, but it is always difficult because you can't have a mediation if someone's not able to process their emotions or be able to think clearly because they need to make key decisions that shape their future. One of the other things is the hybrid mediation. Like Emma and Kerry said, we're doing a talk on that later this week where you've got then the support of your lawyer with you. which can help you make decisions to be able to do it that way. Another question that came in about talking about support teams that came up. Excellent idea, but how do people afford this? So that is always a tricky one. It'd be lovely if you had a therapist, a divorce coach, lawyer, financial advisor, and that is an upward battle for myself as a lawyer and mediator when you know people need that emotional support, but they say, well, I'm already paying for a lawyer, I've got my mediator, and it does get expensive. Any tips or anything, Kerry or Emma, of how to navigate through that?
I think it's, from my point of view, and I'm interested to see what Kerry would say, is that if the idea of therapy and coaching is brought into the room at the very start, people become less reliant on their lawyers and understand that utilizing a team in the right way will save you money.
Yeah.
Quite often, people will come to me when they're beginning to run out of money because they've hemorrhaged money far too early in the process, when they weren't emotionally ready, when they were sending a million emails to their lawyers and getting billed, which obviously is the right thing to do because you're offering a service, that's not a criticism. But actually, if they understood in more depth what that will cost them, how their emotions will be better met somewhere else, they will actually have more money to spend with the lawyers when they need them. Because people run out of money just when things are starting to get really tricky, when you absolutely do need a lawyer. So if you have decided to separate and you're not in a dangerous position, my advice to somebody is don't go to the lawyer first, go to the therapist or the coach first to understand yourself, what you'd like. Then you can give great instructions to the lawyer. The lawyer can do what the lawyer needs to do for you. And everybody is working then for the good of the client and saving money. Whereas the current mindset is, I'm getting divorced or separated, I need to see a lawyer. And that's where it stops. And that's where costs escalate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's important when we're talking about emotions, and what I was thinking throughout is it's really important to sort of look at the mediator that you're using, and it goes back to one of the questions that popped up, which we haven't got time for, about domestic abuse. Make sure that the mediator that you're using is experienced in domestic abuse, that they can do hybrid mediation, which is the go-to model when there's domestic abuse, and or if a child might need to be spoken to, that you go to a mediator that does child inclusive mediation, or that is a lawyer as well as a mediator, and just spend time. And it's something I talked about in the launch, of spending time to look at the mediator and make sure that they understood, or that are trauma informed, or these things that we've talked about. That I think that's really important, to make sure the mediator suits that the individual clients going through the mediation.
Yeah.
It's
Right,
about
thank you.
accepting that not one size fits all. It's like, do your
Yeah.
research, pick somebody that really gels with you as well. If you've had a bad experience, find somebody else.
Yeah, and it's the same with anybody. We've all had good experience of doctors, therapists.
Absolutely.
There's always things like that, and like I say, it's a good thing not just to find the cheapest or just the first one that's nearest to you. You can do it online now and actually spend some time researching. And or sometimes I'll have 10 or 15 minute chat with somebody wanting to hear a bit more about me and mediation. I think. And there's lots of mediators out there that are willing to do that and think about what services they offer. Right, I think we've run out of time now. So thank you, Emma and Kerry. And there's lots of other webinars later this week. So please have a look on the Family Mediation Council website to catch some other ones as well. Right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.